Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel and our Facebook group and our podcast and our newsletter and our sponsors, Italy Rooting, Abitativa Casa, and Phil Italy. And my guest today is Kristen Hertzog from a super YouTube channel, Anywhere with Kristen. So welcome, Kristen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to talk to somebody who's relocated from the United States to Italy. So, before we get into that, where's your family from originally, and when did they come to the United States?
Well, both sides of my family are from Italy. My mother's side is from Parma, North Italy. And she's actually third cousins to the Pope Pius XI. So that's always kind of a fun pedigree to start with. My father's side is from Sicily, from the medieval village of Caccamo, which is where I'm currently living right now. And for my dual citizenship, I am going through my father's line, the paternal side, which means a few less hoops than going through the maternal side.
That's cool. So I descend directly from Pope Paul III.
All right. This must mean that you are much more religious than others.
Well, the way I put it is, if I see him when I leave here, am I in the right place?
There you go. There you go. That's one way to look at it.
Although he did turn out to be, in the end, he turned out to be a pretty decent guy. But, people don't realize that the popes had kids back then, and a lot of them. So, yeah, that was just a little interesting tidbit I had to throw in there. But it's really cool to be related to somebody like that. And, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. So when did your family come to the United States?
Honestly, my story as far as how they got here is probably like 90% of people who listen to this channel. Early 19 came from Sicily, went through New York, and then in my case, my family resided in New York at first, in Little Italy, and then moved into New Jersey, where the remainder of my family line has lived. Except for me, I moved to Pennsylvania. I have 3 states in my bloodline on my father's side, which is extremely important when you're trying to get dual citizenship through Jurus Sanguini or by blood.
Yeah, I know. I've been working on it. I wish I had started long before this, but I finally got my mom's birth certificate and her apostille. So the only thing I'm waiting for is my daughter to get her birth certificate, because we're going to do all 3 together. Hopefully, fingers crossed. They keep changing the rules over there. That's really distressing.
They do. And it has led to a lot of challenges for me, as well as many other people who have spent literally years and resources and financial strain to get this done. So this is not for the weak of heart. It is not for, somebody who says, I just want to do it for my Italian pride. That is great, but I do not recommend, if you don't have a long-term reason to do this, move to Italy or have your minor children to gain it through the inheritance of the dual citizenship process. It really is a very difficult process that I don't recommend to everybody. Just because we're Italian Americans, sometimes that's not enough, in my opinion, to go through this very, very long and exhausting process. But everyone's different.
Yeah. And I'm doing it mostly for my kids because they're in their 20s. So I want them to have it so their grandchildren can get it. And like you said, if, I've told a couple of people, specifically some in my family, if you have young kids that want to maybe go to college there one day, it is so much cheaper. And it's a great adventure too.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's important for people to realize that the way that the Italian law works is that if your child is under 18 years old and you as the parent have successfully been recognized as a dual citizen, they automatically get grandfathered in, meaning that they become Italian citizens as well. Now, that is my primary reason for doing this. My son wants to go to college in Europe next year, and he's 17 at the moment. So this was the perfect time for me to do this. For those folks who have children who are over 18, such as yourself, this means that they have to apply individually and they have to go through the entire process as adults. And that is quite a bit of a difference in how the Italian law recognizes minor children versus adult children.
Yeah, yeah. Now, is it easier for you now that you're there to, finish it? Now that you're living in Sicily?
So, okay, good question. The short answer is yes, kind of. Basically, I view it as there's basically two portals. Door number one is going through the US consulate. So, depending upon where people reside, that means that that is the consulate that they will go through. So, I live outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This means that my consulate in the States would be the Philadelphia Italian consulate. I tried for over a year to get an appointment to go to the consulate to share my documents proving my bloodline. And unfortunately, because there is such an enormous, enormous amount of people trying to do this in the States, I never got that appointment. So I opened door number two, which is doing it through residency in Sicily. And so the average time that it takes, based upon my own research, is 3 to 7 or 8 months to do it here in Italy versus going through the US consulate and doing it through those channels. That can be many years. But of course, moving to Italy is not for everyone, and it does have its own challenges, both law changes, different documents that are necessary, and you have to physically reside here. You can't come here, get an Airbnb for 2 weeks and say, I'm a resident, sign me up. The law does not allow for that.
Yeah, yeah. And I recall some conversations like that. I was originally going to go through my father's side. And when I finally started working with a lawyer, what he said was because my father was 16 when my grandfather became naturalized, which was kind of sort of okay up until like 2 months ago.
October
And
3rd, it all
they
changed,
pulled the plug out of him.
2024. That's right.
But
Basically,
luckily I had already changed to go through my mom's side because neither one of my mother's parents naturalized. And I was able to get that from the State Department saying that they never did. So, and I was born after 1948. So, that stuff.
Yes, the minor issue has been a major ordeal for so many Italian Americans trying to pursue their dual citizenship. And essentially for your listeners, the new law as of October 3rd, 2024 reads that if your original ancestor naturalized officially before the next in line was an adult, the line is now cut, which means that we, as the ancestors, are no longer eligible for dual citizenship through that line. And that came as a very big surprise to so many people and a real disappointment for those who were just at the tail end of collecting documents and researching and trying to get appointments. It really was a devastating blow. Fortunately for me, I was able to officially apply, get my residency in Italy before the minor issue came to light, which means that I was able to, as of 3 weeks ago, I got my dual citizenship recognized right here in Cacamo, Sicily, which is my ancestral hometown.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's really, really super.
Thank you. Thank you.
And my mom's hometown is just not really small. It's still pretty vibrant in Torito. And when we were there, the Comune people said, whenever you need, whatever you need, just call us, contact us. You're a son of Torito, and we'll do whatever we need. And a lot of Comunes aren't like that.
No, there's 800 comunes in the country of Italy, and each one is different, and they enforce things differently depending upon the people, the powers that be within the commune. I like to think of the commune as a city hall. It's the local branch of government within a town or a city. And those are the folks that when you're getting your dual citizenship through Juris Sanguini and residency in Italy, they're the folks that you're going to spend a lot of time with. In the last 5 months since I've been here, I have probably visited the local commune at least 30 times, at least. And you just have to be available and be very, very flexible. Becoming frustrated here with the process or thinking about it from an American mindset. Like, okay, I did all this research. I have my checklist. I'm just going to go in there guns blazing. It does not work here because the bureaucracy is so great that you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to jump through hoops that you may not understand. And that's really the only way to keep your sanity.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a funny quick story about one of the interviews that I had. He had to do something with his wife. He had been there and his wife came and they had to get some paper for something. And there were two windows. And he went to one window and the guy said, no, 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 you can't have this. They went to the other window and the guy did.
Sounds familiar.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So one of the things I want to touch on, because I heard it from my friend Antonia, there are some really, really great things about living there. No question, the scenery and the food and things like that. But there's also a lot of challenges. So what are the
Such a great question, really. And I think that the biggest thing is expectations. I cannot tell you, as you mentioned earlier, I have a YouTube channel. So people have been following my story for the last 5-6 months. And prior to me coming here, I've had my YouTube channel for 3 years, traveling and doing different things and sharing my story. But the thing that is very interesting is that so many people think I'm on vacation. They say, what a beautiful vacation you must be having. Oh, the wine, the food, the pasta, the love in the air. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't have a microwave. I don't have an oven. It takes me 3 hours to do the laundry because there's no dryer. There's just not the romantic thing that happens when you physically live somewhere. And it's tough. Being an Italian American and being an Italian, they are two different things entirely. And I did not expect that. I really thought that I was going to just morph right into this culture and everything was just going to be so similar because my mother made sauce or we drank Chianti. We're different. We're built different because the culture is different. And those are some of the things that really hit me in coming here as far as expectations go. It's hard to live here. The heat doesn't work as good as home. The hot water runs out. It's just not a vacation. Hello, Bob?
Yes, and that's a perfect example of what you were just talking about, I suppose.
There it is, right there in real time. Yes, yes. Sorry about that.
That's
Looks like our
okay.
call
That's
got
okay.
dropped.
We'll just
So
edit that pause out. That's fine. It's happened before. But it
I'm
was so
sure.
funny that it happened just as you were saying.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like there's just so many little things that happen throughout the day that you just think this is uncomfortable or this is taking longer than I expected. And yeah, it is different to live here. And I think that for many, many Italian Americans, we so much want to be connected to our roots and be connected to that part of us that's bigger than just ourselves. But at the end of the day, we have been conditioned to make it romantic. And I'm convinced after all of these months here that it's not always very romantic. And frankly, many of the Italians here in my town talk very, very romantically and pie in the sky about our lives in America and how ideal they must be and how wonderful. There's so much work. You have so many options for work. And as Italian Americans, we go, oh, the Italians have so much time for the dolce vita and drinking coffee in the cafe. The grass really is always greener on the other side, I think. And being here with one foot in the culture and one foot out of the culture, it is a unique experience to have.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And, some of the visits that we had there, one of the things that I kind of noticed though, and you may have a different take on it because you're there for months as opposed to weeks, they don't seem as stressed about a lot of things. And there's almost it's like, well, life goes on type of thing, where in America, we're always like,
I think that we're very high maintenance in comparison to the Italians. They live a simpler lifestyle here in Sicily. Italy is a big country. Just like America, you can't pigeonhole and say all Americans are this way, all Americans are that way. It's the same here in Italy. I'm living in a mountain village, a medieval mountain village in the middle of the mountains, and there is a population of 8,000 people. So for me, my experience is going to look very, very different than somebody who goes to get their dual citizenship in Milan. That's going to look very different. And the culture also will look different because the regions are so vastly different in so many ways.
yeah, yeah, no, I know what you mean. Just going through some of the regions that we went through, just through the South, and we're going to be going to the North in May, so we'll really see that difference. So, how did the people react to you when you first got there? Now, did they recognize you as a relative or somebody who belonged there, or
This might disappoint some of your listeners. Nobody cares. You're a foreigner. No one cares. You look different, you walk different, you act different, you don't speak the language. You are a foreigner. Um, n- nobody Nobody is waiting with open arms saying, "You're Italian American, welcome home." There's 17 million of us in America. We're a dime a dozen. And here in Italy, a lot of people come here to explore their roots. And my experience here was not one of open arms of some kind of you're welcome home stuff. What did happen over time is as I learned Italian and I became more fluent, it opened the doors up for better communication. And that is when I saw the difference. It wasn't because I was Italian American. It wasn't because of my last name being Anselmo. Nobody cares about that. What they care about is can you develop relationships with them? And if you can do that through good social intelligence, understanding the cultural nuance, being able to speak confidently with people in their own language and be willing to make mistakes, that opened up the doors for me, definitely. I can remember going into the comune and meeting with an 80-year-old gentleman by the name of Signore Filippo. He is the town genealogist. And I came in and, I shared with him about my family lineage. I bought my family tree book with me here to Sicily. And I said, these are the people who I understand I'm connected to. Is there any way that you could perhaps help me? And so forth. And he did. He really did. He connected me with cousins that live about 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right here. I met my first cousin 2 generations removed. Her name is Carmela, and she is 102 years old
wow.
and the oldest living resident here in the village of Cacamo. And that was very powerful for me. But it's based on individual relationships, not on the idea that I'm a tourist coming in. There might be some interest, but I'm still a foreigner. I'm still a foreigner. I've talked to many Italian Americans here very disappointed about this because they have in their mind that somehow they're going to walk into a town and everyone's going to embrace them. Nobody cares. We're a dime a dozen. We really are. We care. We care because it's a part of our history. It's a part of our lives, our identity. But truly, if we don't speak the language here, you will be hard pressed to really feel truly 100% accepted by the culture because the language barrier creates the chasm.
Yeah, and I've heard similar things from Antonia. I've heard similar stories to what you told, and then I've heard stories where it's quite the opposite. People are just walking
Everyone's
through the
different.
town
Yep.
and They ask them, who
Like,
are you? And they give their last
yeah,
name and they go crazy.
like I said, we can't pigeonhole. We can't
Mhm.
say all of Italy is the way I experienced it. All of Italy is the way that Antonia experienced it. Everyone's going to have a unique experience because we're all different and we're all in different locations. And perhaps if I was in a town of, 100,000 people, my story would look different. So my story is only my story. That's my own personal experience. And fortunately, in a lot of ways, I did feel connected over time, but it wasn't automatic or immediate. It took time and it took energy on my part to really, really immerse myself in being around Italians who did not speak English. And that forced me to learn the language more quickly. And I think that was my saving grace in my experience.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. We lived in England for 2 years, and even though the language was the same,
Mm,
for the most part, there there were these cultural type of differences that you kind of had to get used to, even though
for
the
sure.
language was the same. Um,
Wow.
just little things like we were in a department store and my wife was going to the ladies' room and she walked over and the woman said, "There's a queue." And
Uh,
she looked at me and I said, "It's the line."
right. Sure.
So I knew
I
because I had been there for a while, but just a simple one word.
Yep, yep. And it's the same here. A mountain village in Sicily is a little more old school than being in a metropolitan area. One of the things that I learned early on that surprised me is that in my Italian American family in the States, if you were to serve your guest a glass of wine at dinner, you're going to fill the glass about 3/4 of the way full. And so that would be considered a glass of wine. It took me a month of doing exactly that, thinking that was Italian. That is not Italian here. You never fill your glass of wine, and nobody else will fill your glass of wine 3/4 of the way high because it's considered extremely rude. It's rude to take 3/4 of a glass because you're not leaving enough for other people, perhaps. So, what happens is every time you have wine, you only give yourself a quarter of a cup only. And that is considered appropriate. But it's just another example of a nonverbal thing I did not know. I assumed because my very Italian American family from New Jersey did this particular action that it would be the same here in Kakamo, but it's not. It's the opposite. And that can create a chasm culturally that nobody's trying to create. It just happens because we assume these are things that we do as Italians. But really, we do them because Americans do that as well. We fill our glasses 3/4 of the way through. But in Italy, it's done differently. So some of those nonverbal faux pas that I made and still make, of course, those are some things that give the Italians pause. And they might think, well, that's kind of inconsiderate of her to take 3/4 of a glass of wine. But I'm not at home anymore. I'm not in America. So I have to do it like they do it. And that is respectful of the culture. That's one example of a myriad of other things that I've done here, thinking they're so Italian American, and they're not. They're not even done here. It's interesting.
No, and that's a really, really good point that that never dawned on me that there are those nonverbal types of things that someone would really have to get used to. And how somebody might see something as simple as that as being offensive.
Mhm,
That's really something
mhm,
interesting for people
mhm,
people to know.
mhm. Yeah.
So let's talk about your channel a little bit because I love the way you do you walk down the streets and it's I don't want to say it's a travel log, but it gives more insight into things than just some of the other things saw with people just moving the camera around and stuff like that. So why'd you do that?
Thank you. Wow. For me, I like to have realism and genuineness in what I share. And I think I realized early on when I was really deep diving into other people's experiences here in Italy. I found a lot of commonality in the content where it was very, you know, look at me drinking wine, look at me eating pasta, look at the beautiful views that I have 24/7. And I think that for me, I wanted to take a different twist to that content. Yes, absolutely, still having beautiful meals, still having gorgeous, but I also decided to really emphasize the realistic side of coming to Italy by yourself, not speaking the language fluently, to get this very nebulous governmental process done called dual citizenship. And so I really have tried to do that in a way that is also entertaining, but I make a lot of mistakes. I've fallen all over my feet culturally so many times, and I will document it because I think it's important to have a realistic view of our native homeland, our ancestral homeland. I post once a week, usually aired on Sundays, and every week I'm publishing something different. So recently I did one on culture shock. I went home to Pennsylvania over the Christmas holiday, and then I had to return here to Kokomo because my dual citizenship wasn't finished. And so, just that experience of living here for an extended period of time, going home in the throes of the holiday season, and then coming back, and how crazy all of that was for me. So that's one episode. Another episode is about my 102-year-old cousin. Another episode, because I literally live across the street from my ancestral home church, that my ancestors have been married, baptized, funerals in this church. I can throw a rock at it from here. I talk about the feast, a certain feast day of San Giovanni, and that experience of parading with the town through the streets with this amazing statue celebrating this man's life. And just, I just try to think of things that have not been done before. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. The channel is growing by leaps and bounds. And I think also for people who are interested in dual citizenship, I've really tried to share my experience with that process in a way that can potentially help other people who may be considering doing it themselves. So, yeah, so that's a little bit about what the channel is about.
And just to take off on that, because I did watch the one when you were explaining that you had to move and you moved to the new place and you moved to the square overlooked, and the Italian said, "What do you want to live there for? It's so old." And
Yeah.
my wife gets mad at me because when we went to the Naples, I wanted to be in the historic district, and we went to Bari, wanted to be in the historic district. I felt that I wanted to see as much as I could what it was like 200, 300, 500 years ago. And the inside of the places were nice, but the outside not so much. But I found that interesting that the Italians were like, but it's so old there.
Totally. They want modern apartments. They don't want to stay in quaint, cute places. And I think that really does speak what you just described. It also speaks to an American mindset. They're not searching for their identity. They
Right, they
already
know
know.
it.
In October, we celebrated the Sausage Fest, which is similar to a harvest festival here in the village of Kokomo. And at that time, I was offered to be in the parade in medieval costume as one of are you ready for what they called me? One of the lost ones. One of the
Oh,
lost
wow.
ones.
That's
Now,
interesting.
at first, I was a little taken aback by that because once again, it separates me from the others. Lost one. I'm not one of them. I'm a lost one.
Lost one.
But
Yeah.
I think that in experiencing that amazing parade, walking through the medieval streets up to the castle, which is right here in the town, and participating as a local in that interesting day was very meaningful for me. And I decided to take the term lost ones as a tremendous compliment that I have been found. But it's interesting that feeling of separation that you can have by being called a lost one. Um, yeah, it was a great day. I really enjoyed it
Yeah.
and felt very
Yeah.
connected to it.
My experience with something not quite the same, but similar in a way was when we went to Montebello, which the palazzo is still there. They were great, but at one point, my wife said, "Where's Nicole?" And I said, "I don't know. She can't be any. There's nowhere to go. She can't be far." But we had worked with Letizia from Italy Rooney, who helped set this up, and my cousin Cinzia. And all of a sudden, we hear this music playing, and the mayor dressed from the 1850s, and they had made a dress for my daughter to wear and dressed her from like as if she was the Contessa. And they had a young man dressed in, period costume and everything like that. And that was just, first of all, it was a surprise, but it was so moving that they made these costumes. I mean, they made these dresses specifically for this. And it was
Sure.
really so cool that they would take their time. And like I said, even, the mayor went out of her way. And we're sitting there, and they had this, big feast and all of that. Everything made, nothing bought in the store. Everything was made by them. And at one point I said, what about the owner of the building now? Doesn't he care that we're on his property, so to speak?
Oh.
And they went, no, don't worry, but he may come out. And towards the end of the day, he did come out and he asked us if we wanted to go inside. And it was bittersweet because you could see what it once was, but it was just totally run down and leaks and all of that kind of stuff. They said the town had wanted to buy it several years ago and he won't sell it. I can understand why he doesn't want to sell it. But they wanted to, I guess, restore it back to what it once was, which is what I find really fascinating in Italy, that no matter what church you go into, it is pristine. I mean, I'm not talking about the little chapels here and there, but I'm talking about, the main church in the towns and stuff like that. I find that how much they care about that. And the other thing that you pointed out was people say, well, the Italians don't do DNA. And I said, they don't have to. They just have to go to the cemetery and everybody's there. They go back 500.
It once again separates us. Another great example of how they have no preoccupation with their own identities. And actually, I have had numerous people here ask me why. Why are the Italian Americans so hell bent on figuring everything out as far as their cultural identity goes? And my answer is, we didn't really have a choice because we are the ancestors of the people who made the choice to leave. So there is a missing piece in our own identity. Many people can't trace back. I've been very fortunate to be able to visit the hospital where my great-great-grandfather was born, the street that he lived on, the number of the house, the church ancestral bowl where children were baptized. I am really, really in a position as an Italian American of having a significant amount of information. But I know that many of my compatriots haven't had that much information that has been traced down or brought down to them. And I think at the end of the day, just like the Italians can romanticize the Italian American experience, we are equally as guilty of doing it on our side. It is truly interesting to sit at my neighbor's table with all the extended family. Grandma's there, great grandma's there, the 3-year-old grandson, all the kids, and I'm the only Italian American at the table. Every one of them was born and raised in this town. And to hear them talk about how they perceive us is unique because we're very used to being on our own side of the fence and talking to each other. Italian Americans talk to Italian Americans. It's tough for many of us because we're so far removed from the real authentic Italian experience. And, I've had some very interesting things asked of me about how Italian Americans are so hungry for their ancestral background. And why do we spend so much money doing DNA tests? Why does that matter to us? Why are we so passionate about getting all of this info? They just don't understand it. And, it makes sense. They're not striving. They're not striving. They know who was born and raised here. They don't have any questions in their mind about where they come from. And we fascinate them.
Yeah. And, and that's interesting that they talk, about that everybody's there. I mean, I grew up with my grandparents, my great grandparents obviously were in Italy and things, but I just wish, I think for me anyway, I can't speak for everybody. For me, feel I missed something because I didn't ask. I was a little kid. My parents were on the younger end of the family. So my grandparents were already, when I was 10, they were already in their 70s. And my paternal grandfather had died when I was born. And my father's mother didn't speak really any English. But my mom's mom, I used to play cards with her. And my biggest regret is that I didn't ask questions. And I was only a kid. So it makes sense that I didn't.
Of
But
course.
now in retrospect, I'm like, oh my God, they had so much information and I didn't
Mm.
ask.
Well, that brings up a great point, Bob. And this is something that I think you and I really share. As a YouTuber, I'm very interested in producing great content. I'm very interested in creating great content that people see now. But your channel and my channel will be preserved for generations. Did you ever think about that? People
Once in a while, I
500,
say, I'm going to be there for a long time.
yes, 500 years from now, I believe if the world continues to spin, that my own ancestors are going to watch my YouTube channel and watch my experience here in Sicily and see what I went through to get my dual citizenship and the challenges of finding identity as an Italian American versus an Italian. Somebody is going to see that stuff. So we're preserving our ancestral knowledge for future generations. So whatever you lacked as a child in asking the right questions, think about how people in the future will not be in that situation because they will be able to go back to these videos and to this content and see and learn and better understand, hopefully, their own identity as human beings and as Italian Americans. It's a striking thing to think about that what we're producing is not just short term, it's long term also.
Yeah. And, my wife remarked to me just the other day, she said, she was watching something and she said, you know, it's so nice that you're getting these stories from these people that everybody, the stories are similar, but they're different, because everybody's family obviously was different. The reason they came, what they did there, how they got here, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of why I do it because I feel that it's important just, and I didn't think of it in terms of the way you said it, but not only am I preserved, but all of these other people now are
Bravo.
preserved,
That's right.
and I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank
it
you
is
for that.
striking. You're welcome. It's striking to think about. And, hopefully in generations in the future, they won't feel this great desire to find their own identity as much as our generation does because we didn't have things recorded. We didn't have things that were just given to us on a platter like you and I are doing right now and what you're doing with the special guests on your show, giving them that opportunity to share their backstory. It's a very powerful vehicle to future preservation of our own family ancestry.
So before we go, what's the name of your YouTube channel? And if people want to get in touch with you, they ask you any questions about citizenship or living there or anything, how would they do that?
Absolutely. I'm very active on answering all the comments. So the best way for people to see my YouTube channel is simply typing in anywhere with Kristen. Anywhere with Kristen, Kristen, anywhere with Kristen. If you type that into your search bar, and I can give you a link also, Bob, so that you can put it automatically in the text for
Yeah,
your for
yeah,
your
we'll do that,
folks.
and I'll put it in the
Yeah.
blog too.
Thank you. Yeah. Anywhere with Kristen. And I post weekly. And folks can ask any questions they may have or also offer comments in the YouTube comments section. And I'm always interested to hear how other people are perceiving my journey, how other people perceive their own Italian or American identity in context of the content I create. And I welcome all of your listeners to consider checking it out. I won't be here much longer, which is sad to me, but I will be continuing to create great content once I'm home. And also, my husband and I plan on traveling quite a bit in the next year. And Italy is also, of course, on the docket list. So
That's super. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well. And thanks for just taking the time to listen to my story and share parts of your own as well. It's so important for us to keep these stories alive.